Representative Eskamani, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And much like my colleagues, members, I had conversations with my constituents as well before coming back to Tallahassee and join in what was an initial expression of optimism. I remember being here during the previous special session and talking to my Republican colleagues about ideas to tackle this issue, looking at it from a bipartisan fashion, trying to work on bills together. And what was actually produced was incredibly disappointing. Democratic bills, Democratic amendments not considered, the Senate already gone. So obviously, even our ability to get amendments attached seems slim because the other chamber is not even here anymore. And, on top of that, some of the concerns my constituents shared with me was, we don't want you to go back to Tallahassee and make it harder for me to hold my insurance provider accountable. We don't want you to go back to Tallahassee and develop less viable coverage where I'm still going to pay too much, but now for less. And I expressed so much optimism to them. I said, this issue transcends party lines. We're going to be okay. We're going to have these great conversations and figure it out, because at the end of the day, Republican or Democrat or no party affiliation, again, your insurance rates don't care. Your rates will go up no matter what your political affiliation is. But what we do know to that point is people are feeling the pinch. Things are more expensive right now, and my rent is going up. I'm a renter in my district, and my landlord's response to why rent was going up was his property insurance. And so I feel that struggle and have two roommates to help me navigate those new expenses. And that's not the case for every person, especially for our single parents and for folks who are, reliant on having property insurance because that's the only way you can maintain a mortgage. Many banks require property insurance in order to have that mortgage. And so I came to this space incredibly optimistic, but unfortunately, I'm leaving very disappointed. I brought forth the climate change amendment, not to be coy, not to be snarky, but because it actually is a legitimate issue that insurance companies and reinsurance companies are calculating. And when you look at a state like Florida, we are most prone to the impacts of climate change, and we already have been. And so if you don't tackle this issue as a state and look at mitigation efforts and collect data that the insurance companies are using so then we can then act on it, then, we're continuously ignoring this problem as it gets more expensive to ignore. And candidly, it does cost money to tackle climate change, but it's a lot more of an expense to do nothing. And unfortunately, that also failed today, alongside amendments to put into place rate freezes. I mean, it's so discouraging to hear the Senate bill sponsor, who has a background in this subject matter, to say that we might not see relief for 18 months or never. I mean, that is shocking, members, for that to be publicly stated and for folks not to be outraged by that. We came here to deliver relief and deliver results, and yet I can't go back home and tell my constituents that that's going to be the reality. Now, what I will have to tell my constituents is that the process for you to actually hold your company accountable and potentially go to the courts as a last resort, that we got rid of, that we made harder. And that's just not fair. And, maybe I live in this, utopia where I like to think we can improve consumer rights at the same time to try to reduce rates. But for some reason, that give and take doesn't exist. And we tried to remove the bad faith language to, we already have Senate Bill 76 deal with litigation. Litigation did go down. Why do we have to do it again? Why can't we let to see what the impact of 76 is while we also put into place different cushions and safety nets? And again, it's incredibly disappointing to see that the opposite is happening. And even with the RAP fund, it's only for hurricane losses. And there are so many other concerns and reasons why people file claims. I had a tornado in my district. It started on the south side at District 47 and moved all the way up to my house in Thornton Park. And when I drove through my district to help families in those situations, homeowners and renters were impacted. Some totally lost their roofs completely. And I knew which families were going to be able to afford this damage compared to those who wouldn't. compared to those who would now be homeless and having to live in hotels as we try to figure out what their next steps are. And I want to make sure those homeowners, when they file a claim, that they're going to be able to get a quick response, not be dragged out with unnecessary paperwork, and of course, be able to also benefit from what this legislature is trying to do. But when you limit the RAP fund to just hurricane losses, then you're excluding a large population of Floridians who are going to be impacted by other types of disasters, including those tied back to climate change. And so, I also just heard this comment made by my peers that we got to do something. I want to come to Tallahassee and do something. But members, you don't want to do something if it's damaging. I don't want to go home to my district and say, I did something, but actually might make your consumer rights more difficult to access, and you actually might not even see a reduction in your rates. I understand it's campaign season, but it's not okay to go back home and say I did something when you actually potentially caused harm, or you didn't get any guarantees that rates are actually going to go down. And so I actually want to push back against that. I don't think it's okay to just come here and say I did something when, based on also comments made by my peers, we had a lot of time to do something during regular session and we didn't. And finally, I'll close on this point. I find the Office of Insurance Regulation to be incredibly flawed. I think when you have a position that is not elected, that is appointed by a position that is well funded by insurance companies, that we have a serious situation of the fox guarding the hen house. And when I ask questions about how many rates have been increased, and by the way, a lot of Floridians did not realize that OIR under the governor's administration approves rate hikes. And folks were appalled by that because they're wondering, who do I express my concern towards? And it's like literally an office that is supposed to regulate this industry is appointed by someone who worked with the insurance industry, by an elected position who is funded by insurance companies. That is not a good system, which is why I would recommend that the Office of Insurance Regulation be an elected position so folks can decide who should serve them in that capacity. And also they need more funding for staff to maintain accountability. I don't understand how we can put into place an FYI that you should pass down savings to consumers, but then not actually require it for every type of policy component in this bill, and then at the same time have no consequences or repercussions if you don't pass down savings. And what I'm worried about is if there are savings, it might become more political contributions to people in this space who are giving this support back to insurance companies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.